Senator from Ohio.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the senator from Ohio as the presiding officer this noon. I ask unanimous consent to call off the quorum call.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 10 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thanks, Mr. President. This week marks the final week of Black History Month, an annual tradition that celebrates Black history and culture, but also is a call to action to continue our nation's march, as halting as it sometimes is, towards equality. This week, we take an important step toward awarding a Congressional Gold Medal to the foot soldiers who participated in Bloody Sunday and Turnaround Tuesday, the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March. Senator Scott and I and Senator Shelby and Sessions and the Banking Committee moved forward on that earlier today. I'm proud to be one of the 65 co-sponsors. I'm also introducing a resolution this week instructing the Postal Service to issue a commemorative stamp honoring the 50th anniversary of Selma. It's far past time for us to honor the brave men and women who risk life and limb to demand full participation in our democracy. We do this on the Senate floor. We can do it by traveling to Selma. Next week, Senator Scott and I will lead a delegation to Selma for the anniversary of the march. I understand my colleague from Ohio may be joining us. I took my daughters there a number of years ago, Emily and Elizabeth. I look forward to journeying with my wife to Selma in a couple of weeks, marking the 50th anniversary. 50 years ago, Dr. King led thousands in that 54-mile march, the second Selma bridge crossing, if you will. They arrived in Montgomery 4 days later to a crowd of 25,000 Black and white supporters. In his speech that day, Dr. King told a story of one of the marchers, Sister Pollard, a 20-year-old African-American woman who lived in Montgomery during the bus boycott, only a little less than a decade earlier. She was asked if she wanted a ride during the march instead of walking. She said no. And the person said, "Aren't you tired?" And she said, "My feet are tired, but my soul is rested." Progress is never easy. As we celebrate Black History Month, we're reminded of the long journey we've traveled and how far we still have to go. This month, we celebrate the contributions African Americans have made to the fabric of our nation. When Carter Woodson started what became Black History Month in 1926, my state of Ohio, the presiding officer state of Ohio, had already produced 19th century poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. Columbus native Granville Woods had already invented the telegraph device that sent messages between moving trains and train stations. Mary Jane Patterson had become the first Black woman to graduate from Oberlin College in my part of Ohio. Garrett Morgan of Clevelander invented the traffic light. State Representative John Green had introduced a bill to establish Labor Day in Ohio, later becoming Labor Day, which we all celebrate. Colonel Charles Young, who found freedom in Ripley, Ohio, became, in the presiding officer's old congressional district, became the highest ranking African-American commanding officer in the U.S. Army 120 years ago, and the first African-American superintendent of a national park. This month, we celebrate other pioneering Ohioans, two Pulitzer Prize winners, also Nobel Prize winning writer Toni Morrison from Lorraine, and former poet laureate of the United States, a Pulitzer Prize winner Rita Dove from Akron. Gold medalist Jesse Owens grew up in Cleveland. Jesse Owens spoke at my brother's high school graduation in Mansfield. Howard Arthur Tibbs from Salem served with the Tuskegee Airmen, and whose family I was honored to meet in 2007 when this body posthumously awarded him the Congressional Gold Medal. Congressman Louis Stokes, whom so many in this body know, who rose from one of the first federal housing projects in the nation in Cleveland to prominence as a lawyer and legislator. Lou Stokes yesterday, Mr. President, celebrated his 90th birthday. He argued before the Supreme Court in his legal practice, and during his 2 decades in Congress, he was a forceful advocate for the city he loves. This month, we honor them and many others. These achievements have come in the face of centuries of oppression, making these achievements all the more remarkable. They have not come to be recognized simply through chance. It took a century of concerted effort, longer than that really, Mr. President, led by Black Americans like Dr. King, to give voice to the struggles and to the stories and to the triumphs and the traditions. These stories are the ones we celebrate this month and the ones we must do more to honor and tell. This month, I'm introducing legislation to begin the process of designating the Parker House in Ripley, Ohio as a national monument. John Parker was a slave who purchased his freedom, became a successful businessman, helped many others to freedom on the Underground Railroad through crossing the river, the Ohio River, and heading north, often some to Oberlin, ultimately many to Canada. Stories like this are too often untold and overlooked. They show us how African Americans have shaped their own destiny in this country. I hope that my colleagues will join me in honoring the African Americans who have made us who we are as a nation. And I would add that I hope this 50th anniversary, this trip that a number of colleagues and I will take to Selma, will mark progress in voting rights. We took huge strides in voting rights in the last 50 years. In fact, in 1964, it was a conservative Republican congressman from north of Dayton by the name of William McCullough, who was the senior Republican on the House Judiciary Committee. Jacqueline Kennedy and others credited Congressman McCullough, perhaps more than any other single member, even more than Hubert Humphrey or Everett Dirksen, for voting rights passing, the civil rights and voting rights passing the United States House of Representatives, the Senate, and signed by the President. Unfortunately, Mr. President, in the last few years, we've seen state legislators and far too many members of this body try to scale back and roll back some of those gains in voting rights, all in the name of stopping fraud, when in fact voting fraud is much exaggerated by them. It simply barely exists, but the efforts to roll back voting rights has resulted from that. It's wrong, it's shameful, especially as we celebrate the 50th anniversary. I'm hopeful we can move forward in spite of what this very conservative Supreme Court has done and move forward on voting rights as we honor Black History Month, as we honor 50 years of Selma, as we honor the work that African Americans and whites have done to make this country a better place to live. Mr. President, I yield the floor.